This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
There are three presenters from the Southern Oregon Animal Rights Society, and just give you a little overview of what's going to happen this evening. We're going to start with, after this introduction, with a 22-minute video about animal rights and why people are concerned about that. And then we're going to come back, and let me get my schedule here so I remember what we're doing. Okay, the video. Oh, and then we're going to talk about our personal stories. Why don't I introduce you all at this point? Come on up. So this is Alexa Priddy and Lynn Bernhardt and Nina Council. And we're all going to tell our stories of how we got interested in this animal rights stuff and why. And included in that, we'll interweave some content about the things that we learned that motivated us in that direction after the video. And then we're going to, let's see, after the video, we'll have our break. And during the break, this won't be your ordinary RVML break, because in addition to the vegan refreshments, we're going to have some other things going on. One thing that we want to do is rearrange the chairs so that we can have something that's a little more intimate for discussion. So we're going to face this way after the video. So we'll ask for your help in rearranging the chairs. And you'll also have a chance to look at some literature, and I have some kind of show and tell factory farming implements back there that I think you'll find very interesting. And we're going to have also a short video back here during the break, and I'll explain about that later. So did I leave anything out? Are we good? Okay. All right, so let's roll the video, and then we'll come back and go from there.
Throughout history, from the ancient times of Pythagoras and St. Francis of Assisi, through to Charles Darwin and Albert Schweitzer, there have always been individuals who had high regard for the lives of animals, who wrote and spoke out in their defense. Now, for the first time, there's a mass popular movement. It's growing rapidly, and like the women's movement, looks set to transform the world this century. Animals deserve to live their lives free from persecution, just as humans do. But unlike previous movements, animals cannot liberate themselves.
All changes in society have been brought about by people getting angry, getting up and fighting for it. Slavery was brought about by a mass popular movement. Women's rights was brought about by, yet again, another mass popular movement, people becoming active.
What happens to them is unbelievably cruel, unbelievably vicious, and I believe that you have to fight very, very hard to stop it.
We seem to think that just because we're of a different species, we can treat them as we like. People who are particularly violent or cruel to animals may go on and become violent to human beings.
History has shown that animals have been subjected to the most inhumane treatment. They have been regarded as inferior and having no rights. Dr. Richard Ryder is a clinical psychologist and was one of the founders of the modern animal liberation movement.
Animals have always been terribly important for human beings in our art, in our religion, in mythology, folklore, but also, of course, in our economics and in what we eat. So animals have always been central. A lot of people talk about it as if it's a sort of a peripheral issue, but it's really very central to the whole psychology of the human species.
So why are we cruel to animals?
Violence is actually pretty basic in not only all human beings, but most other animals too.
Got to take control.
That's it.
Controls might sometimes mean no!
No! No!
Under certain circumstances, we are wired up to behave in a fairly dominant way. For example, in self-defense.
In the 21st century, we rarely need to defend ourselves from animals. Yet there continues to be large-scale cruelty towards them.
The major cruelties of the 20th century, animal experimentation, factory farming, the increased exploitation of wildlife, all these things were allowed to develop and get worse, and nobody really challenged them until, in Europe, until the 1960s and the 1970s, and then suddenly this whole issue became alive again, and we saw this revival of concern about the moral relationship between humans and non-humans. I think, to be fair, some people turn a blind eye to it because it's not very clear to see. When people can see animals suffering, they are concerned. This is why the role of television has been very important in bringing to people's attention what animals are suffering at human beings' hands. If people do see suffering, they do tend to be concerned about it. But of course, there are very good reasons very often for being cruel to animals, like there's money in it, it's part of a commercial operation. People think we need animals for various purposes. And people get used to things. People get inured. It becomes a sort of habit.
The animal rights movement is an all-encompassing set of theories and practices. It is not just about signing petitions or disrupting fox hunts. It's about abolishing all cruelty and unnecessary exploitation of animals. It's about upholding the due respect given to all living creatures, no matter what their species.
We draw this hard and fast line down the species barrier between our species and other species, seem to be just an irrational prejudice like racism or sexism. So I coined the word speciesism, partly to bring this home to people, make people realise that it's a nonsense. There are no very good reasons for treating non-human animals in a different way from the way that we're supposed to treat other human beings. It doesn't matter whether they reason or not, and how intelligent they are. The question is, can they suffer? And as science develops, so there's more and more evidence that animals can suffer pain and distress in the same sort of way that we can.
Skin and bone, call your own. Stronger breathing patterns of your soul. The pathetic lies to hide the scars. Well, I know your history, I know who you are.
We now know that animals have feelings. Like us, they love and they suffer. They have a basic need to live according to their inherited nature and to socialize with others of their own kind. Charles Darwin said, "Emotions and faculties such as love, memory, curiosity and reason may be found well developed in animals."
After Charles Darwin, who, as you know, in about 1860, put out his idea that we're all related through evolution, that human beings are animals, it's like the moral implications of that message hadn't yet really been realized. Finally, the penny is beginning to drop, that if we're all related through evolution, we should be also related morally.
Only recently, in 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights declared that each person is equal in all aspects of society and the law. A further step forward was taken when the Declaration of Animal Rights was drafted in 1978, paving the way for a mass movement in defense of animals. No animal should be ill-treated or subjected to cruel acts. All wild animals have the right to liberty in their natural environment. All companion animals have the right to complete their natural lifespan. Abandoning an animal is a cruel and degrading act. Animal experimentation involving physical or psychological suffering is incompatible with the rights of animals. No animal should be exploited for the amusement of man. Any act involving the slaughter of animals is a crime against life. Defenders of animal rights should have an effective voice at all levels of government.
It's a very well-reasoned movement. The theory is extremely well-developed. But of course you need more than that. You need to learn how to put those moral theories into practice.
To me, it's anybody who does something for the animals, something active, where even if it's writing a letter, signing a petition, that's all an activity to end animal suffering. But people go further, and animal rights activists are normally people who go and rescue animals and do something like direct action to directly save animals' lives.
Are we going to abandon the countryside, Elbow?
Heather James was one of the coordinators of the campaign that closed down Hillgrove Cat Farm, vivisection breeders.
I see it as I have everything. I have my freedom. I can see who I want. I can be with who I want. I can eat what I want. I can sleep when I want to. And the animals don't have any freedom at all. The animals in the laboratories, the factory farms, they don't have any of that. So I've got it, and I have the power to make a difference, to make changes, which we have done already. And I will keep using that for as long as I live. I'll never ever do anything else.
Animal rights activist Neil Johnson leads a hunt sabbing workshop.
It's absolutely vital and crucial that if you have any subs down here, they stay tight together, they make no noise whatsoever.
Animal rights is a fundamental part of civilised society. There is no logical reason why nowadays we should chase a hunted animal to death just for our own enjoyment.
That is absolute textbook perfect sabbing. Some situations you can't do that. Some places it's too dangerous from a physical point of view.
There's no need at all why we should use animals for food, for entertainment values, or to make money out of them.
All animal abuse really, and human abuse, and the damage to the environment and the planet, all these things concern me very, very deeply, but particularly animal rights, because I see them as totally innocent victims. Animal welfare, such as the work that sanctuaries do and animal welfare societies, is excellent work, and it directly helps animals who are suffering, so it is necessary. But you can be seen as mopping up a huge problem, and we have to address the actual problem rather than the symptoms of the problem, and you have to stop the abuse at the root. So for instance, greyhound racing, greyhound rescue are absolutely fantastic. Rescuing greyhounds is absolutely essential, but what we've got to do in the long term is stop greyhound racing.
So if you think something's cruel, if you think you should actually do something to stop that cruelty, then you've got to do it, and you've not got to rely on anybody else to do it for you. First and most valuable thing that anybody can do for the struggle for animal rights is to become vegetarian or become vegan. Straight away you're cutting out that cruelty from your own lifestyle, and then once you've addressed that issue on a personal level, then and only then should you really start looking about how you can better the rest of society.
Animal rights activists tend to be vegetarian or vegan. They have chosen to reduce or omit animal products from their diet and lifestyle.
There's no necessity to eat animals. People can live extremely healthy, good, active lifestyle without the need for killing animals for whatever reason, be it meat, be it for their skins.
But I think, thank goodness, compassion is in all of us. Sometimes it gets a bit stifled. Sometimes it's people are frightened to show it. Sometimes it's overlaid with other feelings. But there is a compassionate spark in all of us. It's natural to us. And that's a very good thing. What we have to do is try to be confident enough to show this towards other people and towards animals as well.
Anything you can do to relieve that suffering, to me, is absolutely necessary, and I think it's our duty to do that.
This is disgusting. I'm not having it. I am standing up for it.
Animal rights campaigners are at the forefront of an ever-changing society. Their campaigns reduce the consumption and demand for animal products and create the need for animal-free alternatives. You can choose to live a cruelty-free life.
I'm trying to. I'm trying to. I'm trying to understand you. What you say to my face, it's different from what you say when I'm not in the place. Am I making sense? Am I making sense? Am I making sense? Am I You're so hard. You're so hard. Honey. You're so hard. You're so hurt.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so next we're going to tell our individual stories of how we got to the place that the animal rights people in the video got to. And first is Alexa.
You all are so nice. Thank you. What I'm going to talk about is my journey with animal rights, and it's going to focus around my diet, because that's been the primary force for me before I came here and got involved with activism. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I started thinking about animals at a young age. Growing up loving our family pets and loving other animals too. Like I can talk pretty loud, is that okay? Okay.
There, let's try, there we go. It's okay.
Okay. Okay. Actually, if you can hear me without it, I prefer.
it's on tape.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So as I said, I started thinking about animals at a young age. Growing up loving our family pets and loving other animals too, like pigs and cows. You see, I thought they were cute. When I was 14, I made the choice to become vegetarian in a largely meat-eating household. I decided to become vegetarian when I made the connection between the animals I loved, the pigs and the cows, and the animals that were on my plate at dinner time. I remember being outraged, even though I was not yet aware of the cruelty that animals endured at factory farms and during slaughter. I decided then that I wanted no part in their death. Because there was plenty of other food for me to eat, I only wanted a part in their lives. From the time I became vegetarian at 14 till now at 24, I have gained insights into the treatment of animals, and my diet has gone through even more changes as a result. Initially, as a vegetarian, I occasionally ate fish meat. It was hard for me, as it is for many people I've known, to understand that fish suffer and feel pain just as farm animals do, but I was eventually able to eat a completely meat-free diet. Since then, I have also learned about the treatment of dairy cows and the hormones they are given. I decided to get my calcium from other sources, like nuts and vegetables, and that is when I became vegan. I have learned in the past 3 years as being vegan, I have learned much more than I ever thought I would about what is in our foods, about reading labels, and about knowing what additives are and how our foods are processed. I've also learned about cooking and preparing my own foods. It has been quite a learning experience, and I'm still discovering new things and have a lot to learn. I am finding that it takes dedication and time to make a change in my lifestyle, a change that is not readily accepted by our mainstream culture. To me, being vegan is not about giving up anything. I am continually discovering new recipes to try and new foods to eat. I actually feel very healthy, and I feel that I'm giving back to this earth by not taking part in animal cruelty in as many ways as I can. My experiences with animal rights have been largely centered around my diet, but since I moved here 2 years ago, I have become a part of the Southern Oregon Animal Rights Society and explored activism as well. I see my experience with animal rights issues as a journey of awareness for myself that I hope will positively impact others. I did not come to this point overnight. I educated myself and made choices at a pace that was comfortable for me, and I am happy for where I've come to. Being vegan and being part of SOARS is one very special thing I do in my life, to show compassion toward myself and toward all other living beings. So that's my story about being vegan, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions about what it was like for me at our break or any other time. So that's my story, and I want to echo what the video said about the fact that you do have the ability to do something, whether it is changing your diet or doing activism, signing petitions. Little changes do make a big difference, so I just wanted to echo that. And I would like to introduce Our next speaker and a member of SOARS, her name's Nina Council, and she's going to talk about her experiences with animal rights.
I'd like to start out by saying something about my background, where I can't ever remember a time in my life that I didn't live with animals. As a child, we had an acre of land in North Hollywood in the San Fernando Valley, and I lived with a Russian immigrant mother, father, 2 sisters, and my little Russian grandmother, who was sort of like a magic woman in relation to animals. We had about 20 chickens, we had ducks, we had a desert tortoise. At one time we even had a weasel for a few weeks. We had cats, dogs, and I remember at about age 5 being very, very upset when I realized that some of our chickens were disappearing. But loving and respecting my parents, I thought that they knew best and that we needed to eat meat to survive. So I accepted that. And I never thought anything of taking eggs from our chickens. We had a beautiful redwood hen house. The chickens had a beautiful life. 2 roosters and about 20 chickens. And my grandmother, I remember always in her room had a straw basket where she was healing some animal. A bird with a broken wing, where she would set the wing with an ice cream stick. She would go in the yard, and she didn't speak English. She spoke Russian at home. There was some rare talent that she had with animals where she would heal them and birds would fly away. And she taught me a lot about compassion and feeling for them. In 1963, I moved to Berkeley with my 5-year-old daughter, Tanya. And having lived in Los Angeles for many years and then moving to the Bay Area, I have always lived near the oceans and was quite a swimmer, quite an ocean swimmer, and later on became a scuba diver. And I did some dives at Salt Point and Jenner, Monterey, and what I found at 60 feet in the ocean horrified me. I saw some pristine areas, but I also saw areas of the sea where there was barbed wire, cans, garbage, boats dumping everything over the side in the oceans. I saw seals with those plastic things from soda cans slowly killing them, stuck on their necks. I saw seagulls tangled in nets. I saw a lot of very depressing things on the shores of California and also on the shores of Mexico where I've lived. Yeah, with the ocean, with what I learned about the oceans, and I met what's her name, Sylvia Earle. She's a deep sea diver. I met her and bought her book. She's done a number of living situations in the oceans with women for months at a time. Then I started learning about the dragnet fishing, where everything in the nets are killed, all the dolphins. The sonar testing by the Navy is killing the whales today, breaking their eardrums. And I, as a working single mother, didn't have much time other than writing letters, signing petitions, sending letters. And I first joined the Jacques Cousteau Society, the Ocean Conservancy. That was my first experience with animal rights. Later I joined NRDC, which was started by Robert Redford, I believe, and a number of other groups, Defenders of Wildlife. Over the years I've joined many groups. Gorilla Foundation, Burro Sanctuary, Tiger Haven. The number of tigers are disappearing on the planet. Then 16 years ago, as a woman of 65 now, 16 years ago I started researching hormone replacement therapy. And I went to my doctor and he gave me Premarin. which I took for a month, and it made me very ill. Premarin is made from collecting horse urine from pregnant mares. And the more I found out, the more appalled and horrified I was. Some years ago, there were 75,000 mares in the East and in Canada, imprisoned in very small, narrow stalls with collector bags where they collect their urine and they make hormone replacement therapy for women from their urine. And these horses suffer horribly because they live in a state of pregnancy. They have a colt. 6 weeks later, they're impregnated again. And on average, for the past 35 years, some 60,000 colts have been slaughtered every year because they're a byproduct of that medication. A lot of women and people are becoming more aware of this horrible pharmaceutical business, and now the numbers of mares has lessened. And in fact, in Oregon, 200 mares were adopted last December. A number of colts have been adopted, and there are websites listed on a page back there where anyone interested in adopting a mare can buy one for $470, or they can sponsor and adopt a foal for very, very low cost. And I'm asking all women and men to relay this message about the Premarin. It's as bad as veal. It's as bad or worse, the way these horses live. Skipped over some things. I brought a lot of pamphlets in the back. Some other pamphlets that I brought concern Howling Acres Wolf Sanctuary in Williams, Oregon, where I visited a number of times, and I will be volunteering there, painting. I'm getting to know the wolves. The people there, 3 people mainly, have 31 wolves that they care for, and we're emailing constantly about the wolf slaughter in Alaska. Alaska has now killed 150 wolves just in the last few weeks from airplanes. And if anyone wants to write letters, there's the website listed back there to write letters to the governor of Alaska. There's websites where you can look up Rescue Ranch and the PMU Rescue for the mares. And in the last couple of years, I had been a vegetarian in the 60s, but I wasn't really a vegetarian in regard to saving all the farm animals because I didn't really know. I was doing yoga, trying to find my spirituality, and became vegetarian for several years, and then went back to eating meat. But over these last couple of years, and since I've joined SOARS, I'm learning more and more about new ways to cook, new ways to eat, and I'm feeling very thankful that I found this group and feel that this is going to be lifelong work for me because I have always lived with animals. In fact, in the 1970s, I raised 12 wolves. My German Shepherd was impregnated by a wolf, and I dearly love wolves. They're part of our ecosystem. And I have never lived without an animal. And sometimes animals can be more comforting than humans. And I think it's up to us humans to start saving them because they are going extinct. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Lynn, and hi. And unlike the others, I'm kind of a case of delayed development. It took me a lot of years to come to the place that of where I really was able to act on my feelings of compassion towards animals. In fact, I'm wearing one of my first several pair of vegan shoes today. They're not bad. I'm going to talk a little bit, my slant's going to be somewhat from an environmental perspective because that's what I do for a living. I've been an environmental planner and a natural resource specialist for 25 years. Close to the mouth. Okay. You know, as a young child, I think I had a very strong connection to animals. as I think most young children do. But as I grew older, I adopted the attitudes and customs of the culture that I lived in, which I think so often disconnects us from the other lives that we share this planet with. However, as a young teenager, I really learned the value of unconditional love from an animal. When I was 13, my family moved to a small town in Alaska, and all the kids in school had grown up together, and I was an outsider, and I was not accepted. And for 3 years, I had no friends. And that's a pretty tough time for a 13-year-old, 14, 15-year-old girl to go through. And I didn't know how to deal with my loneliness and my angst during that time. And so I think I was probably pretty much hell to live with for my family. So I felt rejected by my family as well. And I had a cat. And I felt like my cat was the only being that really accepted who I was and what I did. And I remember spending hours curled up with this cat who always wanted to be with me and shutting out the outside world. And I think this cat literally saved my life because I was suicidal. So I learned the value of unconditional love. Luckily we moved, and I did make some friends, and I have some friends today. All 3 of them are here tonight. I didn't think much about my relationship with animals. I knew there was some disconnect there because I just kind of ignored some things that didn't feel right. But when I went to graduate school, I took a wonderful course. Boy, what an eye-opener. The most valuable class I've ever had. And it was science, ethics, and human ecology. And it explored how we come to have the attitudes that we develop about our natural environment, including animals, and about what contributes to that, our religion, our culture, our scientific heritage, all the things that creates our values. And I realized that there are a lot of other places in the world, other cultures, past and present, that view the environment and animals very differently than we do in this culture. I remember reading about a tribe that had so much respect for life that they wouldn't even pick the fruit off of a tree until it had fully ripened and dropped to the ground. But I also learned about René Descartes, the father of modern science, who believed that animals didn't have soul, and so that justified doing anything to them, had no regard for them, only to learn. And he would nail the dog's feet to a board and cut it open and do experiments and dissection on a fully conscious dog. And he said that their screams were no different than the wheels of a machine screeching against metal. And I also learned how this disregard for animals is really perpetuated today in our modern science. Science is my background. I also learned about human evolution in terms of expanding our circle of concern. I remember a chart that was really wonderful. You can picture the y-axis being the degree of concern and the y-axis being time. And if you look at the line that starts out at the beginning, when we're born and we're babies, we're only concerned about ourselves. As you move in time, you grow older, we bring in our family, we are concerned about our family, and then our friends as we grow even older. And as we become adults, some of us expand our circle of concern to include our community, other nations, other races, the other gender, other races, and hopefully other species. And I realized that I needed to include other species in my circle of concern. I remember telling a friend of mine during this time that I was considering not eating meat anymore. because I felt I was being hypocritical to pay somebody else to kill the animals for me. And this very intelligent person said, well, but you eat plants and they're also alive. And, you know, I realized that our culture really doesn't put a lot of thought into how we regard life. I don't know about plants much, but I do know that more advanced animals do have a nervous system through which impulses travel and a brain to receive those impulses. Physiologically, animals feel pain in the same way that humans do. It's the same chemical reaction, same transmission. And we have to apply some criteria because we have to live, and humans have an impact. We have to eat. Our daily lives, we do impact other life. And, you know, we have to think about how we regard a carrot, an ant, a cat, a dolphin. Will all be different, I would hope. And I really liked the philosophy of John Cobb, whose assessment of how we should consider animals, that we must consider the depth of feeling and the breadth of experience. And that we must consider this what a life is capable of. And I realized that our culture's criteria was pretty much non-existent. Essentially, if you're a human, you have value. If you're an animal, well, maybe you have value. But really, insofar as you can provide something for humans, we live in a very homocentric, anthropocentric culture. And I asked myself, why should it be any more acceptable to hoist a pig up by the hind leg and slash its throat and bleed it for food than to do the same thing to a dog, to our pets? And I realized that familiarity was not enough criteria for me. This utilitarian view of life really bothered me, and because of my spiritual perspective, I knew that all of nature was a manifestation of God, however we wish to define God. And so I became a deep ecologist. And deep ecology, boiled down to its essence, is that all of nature has a right to exist, and has a right to exist relatively free from human interference. There's intrinsic value in all of nature, including animals. And I believe this is where environmentalism and animal rights merge. I also learned about research welfare. This was an eye-opener. And I always thought that research was necessary, that, you know, we had to learn from animals to benefit humans. And I soon realized that what happened in the research world, because I was a part of it, not on animals, but I was a part of it, and that when a person applies for a grant, often from the NIH, National Institute of Health, that becomes their salary. And in order to continue this salary, they have to apply for another grant, and another, regardless of the validity of the research. I also realized that testing on animals could be harmful. Consider the fact that penicillin, harmful to people. Consider the fact that penicillin was tested on monkeys and sat on the shelf for 9 years because it had no effect on them. And consider the drug thalidomide, which was used on women that couldn't conceive, first tested on animals, not to have an effect, and that is when, in the 60s, that babies were born without arms and legs. So anyway, I think for a long time there were things that I didn't want to hear and that I didn't really want to know about because it was bothersome. I didn't want to know about it. I wanted to go on with my life, and I had this disconnect. I wanted to detach my feelings in order to keep on doing what I was going to do, because if I didn't, that means, oh my God, I'd have to change. I'd have to do something. So I don't know what really got me over that hump, but I just decided that when I learned the degree of horrendous treatment of animals in this world, that I could no longer be a part of it and contribute to it, and then I needed to be part of the solution. So now I'm still learning, and the more I learn, the more committed I become. I write letters, I lobby legislators, I try to inform people, I buy animal-friendly food, I don't buy products tested on animals, and we have a very long way to go, and I really hope that all of you will join me in this effort. Thank you. I'm a natural resource specialist. Well, right now I deal with just about everything having to do with the environment, from water quality, forest issues, pesticide use, pretty much name it. When there's a need, I'm the one that responds in the organization I work for. An environmental planner. Land use planning is probably the most familiar to people.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm Ron. Back in about 1977, I had this vague notion that I really didn't want to have to kill animals in order to live. Didn't know any vegetarians, hadn't really thought about it before. I just got this idea somehow. I'm not sure where it came from. Maybe it's because I like to do things my own way. But in any case, I got this idea. So I thought, okay, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to become a vegetarian? And what I did was I made it in a way harder for me to eat meat. At home I restricted myself to kosher meat because A, it was harder to get. I would have to buy it only in a kosher butcher shop, and B, I assumed, wrongly it turns out, that those animals would have been slaughtered more humanely. It turns out the opposite is true. But in any case, that's what I did, and so I started with that, and then I got to a point finally where I was eating vegetarian at home, but only eating meat when I went out. And then gradually I cut out one thing at a time. I took the animals that I thought maybe had it the worst or that were easiest for me to give up, and then I made my list, and just one at a time I took them off. And over a period of 2 or 3 years, finally, one time I went to a Thanksgiving dinner, and I didn't have turkey, and I thought, well, I guess I've done it finally. So that was my transition to vegetarianism. And then during this period, interestingly, I was married to a woman who was raising goats and chickens. She was into doing this, Mother Earth News kind of do-it-yourself out in the country deal. And so we were actually in the San Fernando Valley down in LA, and it was suburbia. It wasn't way out. We had a goat in our backyard, and we had some chickens, and I actually participated in chopping off the head of a chicken, and it was really gruesome. Because the blade wasn't even sharp enough, and that was it for that. I thought, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. And we had this goat in our backyard, and I was very surprised. It was an eye-opener to me. You hear about all the evils of factory farming, but even backyard operations, and I learned this firsthand, there would be people who would have these small, just a very small backyard goat operation. They'd have a few goats, and of course you always have the problem, what do you do with the unwanted males? If you're not using them for breeding, then they have to kill them or do something with them. Sometimes they'll let them be pets for horses, but it's a problem. You've got to do something with them. So usually they'll kill them for meat. But also I learned how they do dehorning, where I saw them put these little goats in a box, and they'd heat up this iron really hot, and red hot, and then they would burn the little nubs where the horns were just starting to grow, and these little goats would scream. I mean, this was painful. No anesthetic. Castration also, no anesthetic, and these were backyard people doing this stuff. So I learned about that, and gradually I realized that any argument that you could make for vegetarianism, you could make even better for veganism. And just to define it, a total vegetarian would be somebody who doesn't eat eggs or dairy or any animal products, but veganism, of course, includes what you wear and buying products that aren't animal tested and that kind of thing. So from all points of view, environmentally, it was more sound. Anytime you cycle protein or calories through an animal, there are inherent inefficiencies. I don't care if you're getting organic or not. There's always this inefficiency in the conversion. So this means that you have to grow a lot more plants to feed to these animals. And that means if it's not being done organically and being done well, you've got depletion of topsoil and groundwater. You have water pollution. In fact, there's more water pollution from animal agriculture in this country than from all other human activities combined. All this runoff, goes into the streams, and all this is because we have to support all these animals on grains. And of course, if they're grazing, you turn the woods into deserts. So it's a disaster all the way around environmentally. And then, in terms of world hunger, I read a statistic, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it said that if we cut our meat consumption in this country by 10%, we could feed the world with the leftover grain. What was that number? I think you had this figure that if everybody ate the way that we eat on this planet, we'd need 3 planets. It's really selfish of us to eat the way that we eat in this country. And so there's the world hunger aspect, and then also there was the nutritional aspect. I've been reading about nutrition for many years, and not only can you be healthy on a low-sodium, vegan, low-fat diet, whole foods diet, but I believe it's the optimal diet. And of course, you need to adjust it and fine-tune it yourself, and I can talk more about nutrition later if you want to hear about it. But just from all these different perspectives. And then there was the cruelty aspect. And I learned how these animals are treated. And I brought, by the way, with me some factory farming implements, different tools that they use to do procedures on animals without anesthetic. And I've got a little table in the back, and I can tell you about some of these products. But I think people generally are aware of the kinds of confinement that the confinement systems that they use to raise these animals, where they can't turn around. You saw some in the video. And interestingly, a lot of people say, well, I buy natural, or I buy organic, or I buy certified humane, and all those things are without definitions. If you buy something that's organic, the government has said this is what organic means. It has a very specific definition. You have to meet all these criteria. These other things, it's entirely up to the producers, except for some of these things where I saw an ad recently, Market of Choice said they had this Painted Hills beef that was raised humanely. And when I looked at their website, I sent them an email to ask them some questions, and tellingly, they did not respond to my email. But even if they do some things that are more humane, there are always these procedures that are done for castration and dehorning, and some identification things like ear notching that are pretty much universal in this country. Not to mention what goes on in the slaughterhouse. And I have a book about that I can show you in the back. Let me just say briefly that what's happened is that it's about corporate greed. And they're trying to make as much money as they can, so they run these animals through the slaughterhouses faster and faster and faster, and they can't keep up when they do the stunning. And I don't want to get into a lot of detail about this, but suffice it to say that of the 10 billion animals that are killed in this country for food, and by the way, that includes 8.5% who never make it alive to the slaughterhouse. Of those 10 billion, about 9.5 billion are chickens. Chickens are specifically excluded from the Humane Slaughter Act. And the stunning that they do is not so much to render them unconscious to pain as it is to immobilize them so that they can be cut properly. So they're paralyzed so that they can be killed. They're not stunned to prevent them from feeling pain. So anyway, I learned about all this stuff over the years, and I wound up in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I started an animal rights group there, a local group, Voices for Animals, which I recently discovered is still operating. And then I left there to work for Farm Animal Reform Movement in the Washington, D.C. area. I did that for about 6 months. And eventually I wound up here and was in near the beginning at Southern Oregon Animal Rights Society. So it's all been a matter of me learning more and more as I go along. And in between, a few years ago, when I had first moved here, I've been here for about 15 years, but when I first moved here, there was no animal rights group, so I was showing videos at home. I started a vegan food buying club before Cantwell started getting orders from Mountain Peoples. So I've just been doing all this stuff because I know what goes on, and I'm in fact doing research now for a book that I'm going to start writing soon. So that's basically the story. Everything that you can imagine about how animals are raised and slaughtered, it's as bad as you think, or possibly worse. And in fact, during the break, which we're about to have, we're going to show a video back here. And we didn't show it out here because it does have some graphic images that might be difficult for some people to watch. But if you eat meat, I recommend it. You know, there was a scene in the film A Clockwork Orange, I remember, where they had this guy in a restraint chair, and they held his eyes open while he had to watch a video. I wanted to bring my chair tonight, but it's in the shop, so you'll have to go back here to see that. So during the break, and I'm thinking, since it's not that big a group, maybe we could just make a kind of a semicircle up at this end. So because after we come back, we'll have a discussion. Now everybody, if you didn't get a handout, we have handouts. Alexa, you have those? They're on the back chair. There's what it is on one side. There are a bunch of web resources that we put together, different things on the internet about animal rights and vegetarianism, and some fantastic resources for your nutrition, all kinds of things. Then the other side is a values clarification exercise. If you would please do that during the break if you haven't done it. There are pens in the back, and we'll just talk about our values. I'm not here to tell you what your values should be, but it would be interesting to look at your values in light of what we're talking about tonight. So do that. We'll discuss it afterwards. And also, if you can help with the chairs, I'll be in the back to talk about those factory farming implements. We have some fantastic vegan refreshments back here. And we'll run the video 2 or 3 times during the break. The restrooms are back here. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted, and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.